Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, the 6th of January 2018, and I'll bring you our first segment of Blender with Luke. I'm Luke Knott, and this is Blender with Luke. So in today's video, I will be going through, as I've got listed down on the other computer, we'll be going through cycles, Blender cycles. Also going to be going through the lighting setup, how the samplings work, and the materials system. I also wanted to make a quick explanation on what Blender is. Blender is an open sourced 3D application that allows you to do many things, from 3D modeling to animation, even to making your own video game applications, even doing test simulations, making like video clips for like movies and things like that. You can also do physics like cloth, water, fire, and you can basically do anything pretty much with Blender. Compared to other programs like Autodesk Maya or 3ds Max or Cinema 4D, Houdini and all these things, Blender is free of charge. You don't have to pay anything to use Blender. You can just go to blender.org and go to its download tab, and you can just download the software or free of charge. I would assume though anyone watching this video would already have Blender. If you don't, then as I said, you can go to blender.org, where you can go to the download tab on there, and you can just download the latest version of Blender, which is 2.79, which is what I'm using right now. And you also got a beta version of Blender 2.8, which is also out, which you can download as well from Blender. I also like to start off by saying that this is the first official segment of our Blender tutorials, which is not just going to be on YouTube, but it's also going to be direct on our website, which means you'll be able to watch the full video segment on our website, as well as watch half of the segment on YouTube. A bit more explanation near the end of the video. So to start off, we're going to learn about the basic controls. Of course, I know this is unfair for experienced Blender users like myself, that I had to go through all the system in order to show people how Blender moves around and how you function around the Blender space and things like that. But this is because of those who are new to Blender, those who have just downloaded Blender, get to actually get an understanding on how to use Blender. If you've used Autodesk Maya, some of the functions or keys are a little different when it comes to navigating around your scene or moving things around your scene and stuff like that. So I hope, if you are new to Blender and you are currently going to download the program, you can pause the video until your download is complete, and then you can come back to this video. For those who already got Blender or have just finished downloading and installing Blender, we can continue with the video. So, as I said, basic functions or navigation around your scene. I do have my screen keys on here, I believe. Unless I have not got them turned on today. No, I do not have them turned on today. No. Okay. No, I do not have my screen keys on, which means that I'm going to have to talk it through slowly and properly, so newcomers actually get an understanding. So to begin with, how I just opened that tab there on the side anyways, I pressed the N key, which allows you to look at many of your things that you got here. It's more of what you would find in your tab, like say over here. Some of the features here are what you'd find in the tabs here. Your grease pencil, which you can find over here like so, which is this little tab here, grease pencil. Let's go back to tools. We also got, you can lock the cursor, which is your camera view, or you can lock your camera view there to cursor, or you can lock your viewpoint to the cursor, which means that I won't be able to when I move around, my view is always locked on this red circle thing within this white circle thing. As for this, if I was in my camera viewpoint, if I had that selected, wherever I navigate around the scene, I will basically be taking that camera with me. But yes, N is to open that. So let's press N again to close that. Excuse me. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is how to navigate around the scene through your perspective. If you press down on your middle mouse button, which is basically your scroll wheel, just click down on it and it allows you to rotate around your object. I'll do that again. Click down on your middle mouse button and rotate around. You can also scroll in by using the scroll wheel, so you can scroll in and you can scroll out. When you do it like this, it goes along like a grid, so you don't control how much you go in or how much you go out if you use your scroll wheel. If you hold down the control key and then hold down the middle mouse button, that allows you to have a more smoother scroll. That's if you hold down the left control key and the middle mouse button and you scroll in, and you can scroll out more smoothly than just using the scroll wheel. If you hold down your left shift key and hold down the middle mouse button, that allows you to pan around your scene from your perspective. If you also hold it down the left shift key and then use the scroll wheel, that makes you go pan up and down. If you hold down your left alt key and use the scroll wheel, that allows you to go across your time frame here, which we will get to that in another video. So those are the basics, and I'll show you again. Press down on the middle mouse button or the third mouse button, however you want to define it, to rotate. Left shift key and middle mouse button to pan. Left control and middle mouse to gradually zoom in, and a scroll wheel to also zoom in and out. So that's the basics on your camera navigation. Not this camera navigation, but your perspective, your user perspective, as it says here. As you can see, when you first opened up Blender and you started a new file, you have this basic scene. You got your camera, you got a lamp, and you got a cube. Oh, excuse me. My apologies. And basically what this is, my computer is burning up because of the recording. I'm using ScreenPresso. But, as I said, with the cube, it's already selected when you started a new thing. So let's just demonstrate that. If I click here on File and then go to New, the same thing, and the cube is already selected. Now, what are these arrows here? These arrows represent the translation tool of where your object moves. So if I press the left mouse button on this green arrow, I can drag it along what is the Y axis. You can tell it's the Y axis because you just look down here in your corner and you got X, which is the red, Y, which is the green. Oh, I said yellow there for a second. And you got the Z or C, which is the blue. So as I said, left mouse click on the green arrow to go on the Y axis, click on the red one to go on the X axis, and the blue one to go up and down. Of course, if you click inside that white circle, this circle here, you left click on that, it allows you to move around the cube freely based on your perspective. For those who do not know what this is your cursor, and you can move that cursor around if you just left click anywhere on the on your grid or anywhere else in your perspective. If I left click here, it's now moved. And what is this? This is to let you know where your objects will spawn or add when you add in other like objects like your cube or a sphere or a cylinder or anything like that. This allows you to put basically your objects or your meshes, whatever you want to call them, into your scene, and that's where they will actually be added to, wherever that cursor is. You can also rotate these and scale these. If you right click, the right mouse button does nothing. Left clicking on this does nothing. However, if you hold down the right mouse button and then drag, you can effectively move your cube. If I press the right mouse button again, it will move it back. Again, hold down the right mouse button and drag. Then once it's moved, you can release your right mouse button and just drag it, move it around like so. If you press if you press the left mouse button whilst you're in this, you can place it wherever you move it, like so. Whereas the right mouse button would move it back to where it last was. So that's the basic of the translation tool. The translation tool is basically the moving tool, as it's known in Autodesk Maya, where it's known as the move tool. In Blender, it's known as the translation tool. You can change this to your rotation and scale tool. If you go down to this section here, which allows you to use your translation tool, which is the arrow. You also got your rotation, which is this curve, and then you've got your scale, which looks like some sort of spear. So if I click on this, the rotation tool, it now turns those arrows into rings. Obviously the blue is to rotate on the C axis, the green on the Y, and your red on the X. Again, if you click anywhere inside that right circle, it spins it based on your perspective. Even if you use the right mouse button, that's a quick movement tool. So you won't be able to rotate it if you use the right mouse button. But that could be changed. You also got your scale tool, which allows you to scale based on your directions along the axis, or you got the middle one, which is your universal. But if you noticed, because I've been playing around with this, with the cube, it's no longer straight or perfect now. But as you can see, if I click back on the translation tool, the arrows are still pointing in these directions instead of from the faces of the cube. Now why is this? If we go back down to our little tab section here, you can see that it's on global. And when it's on global, it will align your axis based on this grid. So X will always be this direction, Y will always be that direction, and your Z will always be up and down. But we can change that. You can change it to local, which is based on the cube perspectives. I mean, according to local, this is actually the top of the cube here. That is the Y axis and that's the X axis. So I can move it along those axes like so. This also applies if I go to our translation or rotation, my apologies, that's rotation, and your scale. You can also change it to normal, which is not exactly any different. Gimbal looks quite strange. I don't use it personally, so I won't go into too much detail. And you got your view, which is based on your perspective. Kind of like if you just held within inside this white circle. That is basically your perspective. So let's put that back to global. You can also like turn off your arrows by clicking on this little object or icon here. You can still move it around, anything like that, but you can't click on the thingy, on those on the arrows or the rings or anything like that. Instead, you would have to use the hotkeys, which I will do the hotkeys at a later time. So let's turn that back on by going back down here and then just turning that back on. Okay. So at this point, you can pause this video and you can just play around with the translation, rotation, and scale tools if you want. Just play around with it to get a feel for it, as well as your navigation. You can pause it and get a feeling for that too. Now, with the controls now done and demonstrated, we'll be moving on to the difference between Blender Render and Blender Cycles. Blender Render is what we are currently on. It's the first thing that shows up when you first start Blender, as you can see up here. Now what Blender Render is, it is a biased renderer, kind of like just a standard Maya render or Maya. I personally use this render when I want to get a look, for example, like making textures or normal maps when it comes to video games. When it comes to video games, I use Blender Render for the normal map baking, which will be demonstrated in another video. I basically use the Blender Render for testing renders before the final render, which I use cycles. The reason I use cycles is because it is unbiased and it gives off more realistic results. When I say realistic results, it gives you a more realistic look to your renders, because you have global illumination. Basically that's where the environment around your scene, like from a light source or anything like that, that light bounces off the surfaces of other objects in the environment or in the scene, and it bounces the colors of the object off and onto other things, onto other objects, like it does in real life. If you have like let's just say if you had like a red bull, not the drink, but a red bull that is very shiny, and you have it placed just in a corner somewhere, and you shine a lamp on it. Now if the lamp is shining on the ball, what happens is the color of the ball ends up bouncing off according to the surface of where the light is coming from and where it's bouncing off, and it will bounce its color across onto other objects nearby. Depends on the really depends on the strength of the light source. When it comes to sunlight, well, the light source in that is always very strong. Oh, a cup of tea is getting cold now. But things like that, that is what makes cycles more better. Now Blender Render is more faster to get renders made faster, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's more realistic. Cycles also gives you more options than Blender Internal Render, which is what we're on right now, which is known as Blender Render. There are other renders that you can get for Blender. As you see, I've got Network Render, which allows me to, which is more, I haven't used it properly, so I can't give a actual professional judgment on that. But from the sounds of it, I think it's something to do with when it comes to like a render farm. You can have a network of computers all rendering your scenes and things like that. That's just from my perspective. You also got PO-V-Ray, which is pretty much V-Ray, but you can get V-Ray separately for Blender, which gives very good results, better results than Cycles Render, but I don't use that. And you also got Blender Game, which is basically the game engine for Blender, which allows you to create simulations. Doesn't necessarily mean that you use it to make video games. You can make certain simulations like physics, or what NASA does. They use Blender for simulations. They use Blender Game for doing things like the rover simulations on Mars and things like that, to get an idea of how it would move across the terrain on Mars and things like that, because you can work on things like suspension on an object and stuff like that. So that's what Blender Game can do. I think I've covered that portion between Blender Internal and Cycles. Those are the difference. Blender Render basically is more, depends on what you're really making and what you want to use it for. It all comes down to your preference. My preference is Cycles, and the reason it's Cycles is because I can do a lot more. I've got a bit more control in Cycles. I used to use the internal render a lot more. Alright, what's the time? So I've been doing this for about 21 minutes now. I think I'll better move on from that to the next sections. The next sections, as I said, this is all about Cycles, lighting, samplings and materials. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just select everything here. To select everything in this scene, you can either click like so, or you can use the shift key, which allows you to hold down the left shift key and then just click on them manually. You can also deselect by doing that as well. So hold down the left shift key, click on your cube, click on your lamp, and then click on your camera, and just press the delete key and then click OK. You want that cursor back in the middle, just press Shift C. Oh my goodness. I see. Hold on, technical difficulties here. I've got my webcam up. Hold on a minute, I'm going to sort that out for you, and I will continue immediately. Welcome everyone, I apologise for that little issue. It's just with Screen Presso, my hotkey to turn on the webcam is the C key, so I'm going to have to be very careful when it comes to doing things like moving this cursor. But Shift C allows you to move your cursor thing back to the middle of your grid. There are other ways you could move it, but the hotkey is more easier. So because of that little incident, I'm going to extend the actual time that I'm going to work this. Generally, the YouTube version of this is going to be about 30 minutes long, whereas the full videos is about an hour to an hour and 30 minutes, depending on circumstances and the subjects in question. Which is why I want to try and move this along, because as I say, I've been doing this for about 24 minutes now, and basically I've got 5 minutes left of the YouTube segment. So I'm going to try and fit in as much as possible, but at the same time be as quick as possible and as helpful and as slow as possible at the same time, if that makes sense. So we're moving on to our, as got down listed, to the tabs when it comes to Cycles. So what we're going to do is we're going to change from Blender Render, and we're going to change to Cycles Render. Now, as you can see, immediately as I changed from Blender to Cycles, is your scene section here has changed drastically. Seems to be more things added here now. For example, you got this render section here, which gives you many things like your device. You can render on your GPU or your CPU. GPU rendering is better for those who's got a powerful GPU or your graphics card and things like that. It renders from the graphics card instead of your processor. If your graphics card is better than your processor, then GPU might be a better option for you if you want a render fast. CPU is better for people with faster processors. That's from my point of view. I mean, I've got two computers here and they do different things. My graphics card on my main computer, the one that I'm recording on now. Oh no, see if I'm recording. Yeah, I'm recording. Okay, yeah. My graphics card on this is much more better than the graphics card on my other computer. But on the other computer, the processor is better, which means that my other computer renders faster on the CPU than GPU compared to this. But as I was going to talk about in this part is these tabs, where this is known as the property tab, your properties. Like in Maya, you have your properties where you can define things, but that's generally in a separate window. This one you can set it all up here on the side without having to move out of this windows. You can just be in this windows here. But we're going to look at dimensions, and your dimensions is important when it comes to making a high quality render. Oh, I got a bit of a numbness in my leg. Oof. Oh dear. Okay, so as we can see, our resolution is what we were looking at. 1920 by 1080. That is the standard high definition resolution on all TVs, basically all TVs, all movies use it. But nowadays, because of the introduction of 4K, the resolutions are more higher. But TVs are still at a 1080 resolution. Alright. So it's just got some parcels coming today, which should be fun. But anyways, let's continue. Yeah, so 1920 by 1080, that is your standard HD resolution. As you notice here, it says 50%. What that is, that scales down your resolution. So although it says 1920 by 1080 resolution, 50% of that is 960 by 540, which is half of the resolution. That is better if you want to do a test render in cycles or internal, just to see what it looks like. I generally always change it to 100% because I want the full resolution. You can change it higher. Yes? Front room where you last left it. Anyways. Oh, bit of family interruptions. Anyway, so let's continue. But yes. So that's the resolution side of it. You can increase it or you can decrease it depending on what you want to do. You've got your frame rate, which is on 24 frames per second by default. Which is interesting because when you look at the timeline or your time frame, it starts from 1 to 250. Now 240 would be 10 seconds under this frame rate, whereas 250 is 10 seconds if you were using 25 frames per second. Now this is the interesting thing here, because you have your frame rate, depending on what country you're from, depends on what frame rate you will use. UK standards, British standards is 25 frames. American standards is 24, 29.97, 30 frames. 30 frames is the default or the minimum frame rate when it comes to video games on things like games consoles and things like that. That's the minimum, not the full. That's the minimum. Depends on the games as well. Some games are locked at 30 frames, others are not. 60 is the desired frame rate or the average frame rate of video games. You do get movies that end up at 60 frames per second. I mean, a lot of videos on YouTube, as YouTube changed the settings, it's now what is it? You can get 1080 up to 4K in 60 frames per second on some YouTube videos, based on how the YouTubers have rendered them out. We also want to go down to, so let's change, actually yeah, let's change it to 100%. I like it to be on 100%. Because I'm British, I'm going to change that to 25 frames per second. You can leave it on 24 frames per second if you wish. It's all down to your preference. If you're making something like a photo resolution, then you can change your resolution to that of a photo quality if you so choose. Your output depends where, if you're making a animation, this is where your images will end up. Or TMP or temp will always be the default output. You can change that to anything of your so choosing. PNGs is the standard quality that you get, but you can, if you click on this, actually, yeah, click on that, you can change it to AVIs, you can change it to JPEGs and stuff like that. Again, it's down to what you wish to do. Your color depth, 8 is the lowest, 16 is the highest in Blender. You do have computers that have like 32 or 64, but Blender can only go up to 16 color depth. It does depend, I do think it depends on your format. So, but I'm going to leave it on PNG. I'm going to increase the compression, which means that because it compresses the file size, but maintains the quality, it's kind of like a TIFF file or something like that. Just like if you're using like an MPEG-4, which is, or MP4 format for your videos, the best codec to use for that, it would be the H.264. Why? Because it compresses the file size, but maintains the quality of the video. So compression is important when it comes to making a render. For cycles, we have things like sampling. Now, sampling is basically well, let's just say, the samples is the quality of your render. Even if you got it in your HD standards and you've done what I've did, keep it on PNG, increase the depth and compression, keep the qualities and stuff like that, it's all looking good, but when you come to render it out, you end up seeing a lot of these noise in your renders. I mean, I have 3 photos of 3 renders that I've made of different qualities. The same render, same scene, just different setup. The first one I'm going to show you is the one that I rendered as the standard default with, for example, I haven't changed anything here. So it's on 128, that's the default, that's when it comes to the render. But if you actually see it on the photo, or the render to be more accurate, if you look where the glow is, at the bottom of the monkey head, her name is Suzanne. If you look there, you can see all this kind of like fussiness of that kind of reflection of the monkey head onto the floor. That is because of the actual sample. When the samples are low, like 128, you're more prone to have more fussiness, or what we call noise. Noise can also be found in like actual photos and video cameras in real life. I mean, if you, for example, if you got a camera with like even if it's a HD camera of 1080 or 720, if you're walking through like a dark hallway with little light or little light sources, you're going to see a lot of fussiness in through the actual camera, and that is the noise. That's what you get with 3D environments as well. So to a certain extent, having noise isn't necessarily bad. It helps with the realism of the quality. But at the same time, if you want a nice clean looking render, especially in cycles, you're going to have to increase your samples. But as I said, with this photo that I got up now, that photo is at the 128 sample, which is what we got here. With that sample, we can increase that to 512, which is the minimum I use when it comes to any renders. You can increase it to 1024, 2048, 4096, but be warned, the higher the sample is, or your sample numbers are, the slower your render time will become. Because what that does, if you increase your render samples, it does its best to get rid of as much noise as possible. Luckily with Blender 2.79 we actually got a new solution to that, which I will show in a moment. If we go down to our next bit, which is light paths, our light path shows all these settings, like the amount of bounces that your light paths do. So if it says 12, that means that's how many times light bounces. That's the maximum. So light bounces can bounce 12 times, and it's maximum. Minimum is at least 3. This can be changed to however you wish to. You can change the shadows, reflects. If you go to this, which is reflective acoustics, as it says here, results in a brighter image, more noise, but added realism. You could reduce your noise if you go to filter glossy. It reduces noise, but it costs the accuracy of the actual render. If you want, you can use that if you want to get rid of as much noise as possible. But at the same time, you got this thing here, which is clamp indirect, which higher values will be scaled down to avoid too much noise and a slow convergence at the cost of accuracy. You can turn these on if you want to reduce noise, but it costs accuracy or realism to the render results, which comes to my next image. With this next image I have just brought up, basically what I've used here is I use the clamp indirect, like here. I changed it to 3. The filter glossy is at 0.5. Now when I took these renders, the first render I showed, the 128 sample, took about 47 seconds to render. This second one took about 3 minutes 19 seconds. That's with the added filter glossy and the clamp indirect. But it is because of the result that I increased the samples from 128 to 512 or 512. But I added these on as well, the clamp indirect and the filter glossy to reduce the noise. So that would cost render time. However, if you don't want to use them because of such things, because of you want it to be accurate, if we go to our next tab, which is our, which one is it? It's not RL. Oh, but we will get to this part. It's here in your render layer settings. I'm just trying to keep up with my list and the times that I'm working on here, so my apologies for that. We also have come to the end of our YouTube segment, so we're going to end our video here on YouTube. And those who have subscribed to us on our website, which I will leave the description, well, the address or the link in the description, as well as in our outro video of this segment as well. We got a link to our website there, which you can go there. You can go to our video tabs on our website and you can subscribe or a small fee in order to watch the full videos. So I thank you all for watching on YouTube. We're now moving this segment over to our website. If you want to watch the full tutorial, you can go to our website and you can watch it there. So thank you. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked the video, you can always hit that subscribe button on YouTube. If you want to watch the full videos, you can go to our website, which is linked below. Thank you for watching.